it's Mo. It is January 26th, and yesterday Freshly Read Books did her second live show for the 2025 book. Wait, what is it called? For the 2025 TBR Spin. So the TBR Spin is a booktube game that was created by Freshly Read Books and Jill at the Book Bully. It was based on a game called TBR Tackle and a game called the Booktube Spin. The Booktube Spin was created by Rick McDonnell, and the TBR Tackle was created by Kieran at Katie Books. Those two games and the TBR Spin are all about reading down your TBR over the year. The rules for the TBR Spin are that you pick 12 books at the start of the year, and then every month, a little bit before the end of each month, Freshly Read Books spins a wheel which has prompts on it. Those prompts lead us to pick a book off of our stack of 12 books. So in January we had 12 books, spin the wheel, figure out the prompt, pick a book, read the book. February you have 11 books, and onward until you have read at least 12 books off of your existing TBR for the year. This is going into the fifth year that I've participated in one of these games. TBR Spin has been going on for the last 2 years. TBR Tackle went on for 2 years before that. The Booktube Spin, it might even be going into the 6th year, really, because the Booktube Spin started pretty early in my Booktube career. Anyway, the point is, I love these games. This is one of the readathons, the reading challenges that I do every year, and I'm super excited to start the new year in 2025. So let's talk about what's on my stack. These are in no particular order. I have The Turquoise Ledge, which is a memoir by Leslie Marmon Silko. The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Kaw and Richard Kadri. Olada Aquino, The Life of Olada Aquino, or Gustuva Vasa the African. Black and Buddhist, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom. And this is edited by Pamela Ayo Yetunde and Cheryl A. Giles. So this is a collection of essays. Cane by Jean Toomer. How to Pronounce Knife, which is short stories by Suvvanka Samovazga. 8 Men by Richard Wright, which is a collection of short stories. Spy Family, Volume 1 by Tatsuyo Ende, and this is translated from the Japanese by Casey Lowe. Another collection of short stories, I have The Dancing Girl of Isu and Other Stories by Yasunari Kawabata, translated from the Japanese by J. Martin Holdman. Begin Again, James Baldwin's American Urgent Lessons for Our Own by Eddie S. Glaude. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, and Love by Toni Morrison. So that is my TBR stack for 2025, for January of 2025. We will see what happens. A lot of times the TBR Spin will cause you to change your stack up. Sometimes you have to swap out a book. Sometimes the prompts don't pick a book off of this stack, so you have to pick a different book. But I am going to try and pick off this stack as much as possible, as I always do. The way that Freshly Read Books is doing the spin this year in 2025, or at least for the first 6 months because she's testing it out, is that she's doing live shows a couple of days before the end of each month. So she had one a couple of days before the beginning of January, and then she had one yesterday on January 25th for the February spin. I haven't participated in any of them because I've been catching up on my 2024 books, but in January I have caught up on all my 2024 books, so now it is time to pick my first book of 2025. I'm torn on it because I would love to join in the live shows. My whole career on BookTube, I have wanted to join more live shows, and I always have a good time when I do. You know, just join reading sprints, just hang out, not be on them, just like watch them and, you know, comment or whatever. I always have such a good time, but they're never like convenient for me. And I think the way that I do the spin, because I like to vlog every TBR Spin book that I read, I usually pick the book at the end of the previous video, but because we're at the start of the year, I'm going to look at this month's spin, pick this month's book, and then at the end of this video, I will look at February's spin and pick February's book. So in February, I will already have picked the book, and then I will, at the end of that video, watch March's spin and pick that book. Does that make sense, right? For me, I don't know if the TBR spin, the way it's going to be now, is going to make sense unless I always read my book at the beginning of the month, which like is a possibility. I could definitely do that and read it by the time the spin is, and then have my reaction in my video to the spin as well as watching the reading sprints. I haven't figured out how I want to do it end because I'm behind. Now I've missed January and February's. Let me watch this video. Let me see what we're going to see. Commercial right when the spin's gonna happen. Okay, so I kind of did spoil myself for this. I wasn't sure if I did or not, but I did pop onto the sprints when she first did these back in December, and I did happen to see something on the screen, not the actual spin. So I was hoping that I didn't see the prompt, but I did, and it is the book you most want to read off of your stack. That's a great prompt, and especially that's a great prompt I think for later in the year, because later in the year maybe you're trying to fit in your stack into different readathons. You know, I think this prompt might have come up last year, like during Women's Translation or something, so I was able to pick a book that, you know, worked for that. But because this is the first spin of the year, like, I don't want to pick a book that I most want to read. I want the spin to tell me what the book is that I'm going to be reading. I had a contingency plan for this. I do bookmarked have this site called, I think it's called Hey Reader. Yeah, Hey Reader, and it's TBR Hey Reader. So you can spin a wheel with prompts on it. You can pick a card with prompts on it. So I think what we'll do is we'll do this for this first prompt. So we spun the wheel said read whatever you want. I'm not interested in reading whatever I want someone to pick for me. I guess we should spin a wheel because that's more in the theme of TBR Spin. So I like this site. I use it every once in a while. I've never talked about it before because I don't use it that often, but sometimes I do like the idea of having just prompts that you could read, just some sort of way to pick what you want to read. But for something like this, it's like perfect. So I will definitely leave this website listed down below. Okay, so let's spin our new wheel, our second wheel for TBR Spin. Let's see what we get. Dark blue. Oh, and the prompt is award winner. See, now this is what I'm talking about. Like, now I have to look and see if any of these books won an award. Let me first check on the actual books. Oh, here you go, right here. So this one is a Giller Prize winner. This one doesn't say, but I'll have to check. I doubt Spy Family is, so I think we can take that one off. 8 Men, I think probably Richard Wright's other book is, but not that one. This one has a prize. National Book Awards winner for this one. Oh my god, so we're gonna have a couple to pick from. And then I know that The Sentence was on the Women's Prize, but I don't know if it won. In 2022, The Sentence was shortlisted, but Ruth Ozecki's The Book of Form and Emptiness won the award. So since that prompt specifically said award winner, and since we already know that 2 of these books have award-winning stickers on them, I think we should pick one of these. So I think, because this is the January prompt, but I'm reading it in February, which is Black History Month in the US, I think we should go ahead and read Black and Buddhist. This is a nonfiction book about Buddhism, and it is edited by 2 people, so I assume that it is multiple different essays, all revolving around Blackness and Buddhism. And this is a book that I heard about early on when I first started BookTube and sounded super, super interesting to me. And then I always thought about it. I always wanted to read it. I never found it. And then finally last year I found it in my nearest little free library. So this will be the book that we read in this vlog. And then at the end of this vlog, I will come back to you and we will watch the prompt for February and pick our February book. And then the next vlog will be that book. Let me know if you're participating in the TBR Spin. Let me know if you read all your books last year. Sarah was saying that she didn't read all her books, and obviously I was really far behind too, but I did manage to catch up. So I'm wondering if a lot of people were struggling with this spin last year, and I wonder if the new changes will help or hinder. We're gonna find out. It's February 7th and I started reading my TBR Spin book, Black and Buddhist. So I skipped the introduction of this. This book came out just after the George Floyd murder and just after the insurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. So the introduction to this is kind of talking about that and talking specifically about George Floyd and George Floyd's murder, and I felt that it was very much angry and very much explicit in its explanation of the murder. So I totally understand why you would be angry. I'm angry too. I'm still angry. It's still angering. It's still upsetting. But I don't understand why you would explicitly describe someone's murder. So I did not like that. I ended up just skipping the introduction and reading the first chapter of this book. This book is all essays, and technically this is called the introduction because it is by the editors of this book, and it is a basic introduction to Buddhism and the idea of how Black lives and Buddhism intersect and what knowledge and information and practice you can gain as a Black person from Buddhism. So that was really interesting. And I really enjoyed that. I tabbed basically every page of this first part. This is all that I've read, by the way. It took me a long time to just read that. And it does have some things that make sense from what I know about Buddhism, and then how it intersects with trauma and generational trauma and race trauma and things like that. I think it set us off to a really good start to see what the rest of the chapters and the rest of the essays are like. Now, I do think there were some things in this that didn't really make sense with Buddhism as I understand it. So I'm interested to know if that's just this person and this editor's thoughts, and if I see more of that in the rest of the book. But this is definitely a book that's big brained. It's going to take me a while to get through. I just finished my fiction book that I was reading, so I'm going to try and read the next essay before I read any other fiction physically, and then see how I feel. This one is super interesting. It also had a lot to do with just trauma in general and Buddhism and the intersection of trauma thinking and trauma experience with Buddhism. I'm super intrigued. I definitely want to read more. If you've read this, definitely let me know. I'd love to discuss it. I am now about halfway through, about halfway through Black and Buddhist. This does have some notes and bibliography, where you got the information from in the back, but not that much actually, and the rest is really the book. So yeah, just about halfway. I've read 3 essays plus what they call the introduction, which so far has been my favorite part. So I skipped this and I only started underlining and annotating this once I hit the first thing. So I do actually want to go back and underline and annotate this part, because not only did I mark a bunch of pages that had a bunch of relevant things, but also I think it's been helping me to kind of read through this. So this is definitely not for me. It's mostly geared towards Black people and specifically Black Buddhists. So one, it's not necessarily for white people. It's not an explanation of Blackness for white people. It's more reconciling with Black people's own feeling about Blackness and also Buddhists' own feelings about being Buddhist, right? So it's not an introduction to this is what it's like to be Black in America or queer in America or anything like that. And it's definitely not an introduction for white people to understand necessarily. I totally understand and respect that, and I'm still gaining a lot out of it, and I think anyone can, but I think it's important to recognize that this isn't for me necessarily. I'm going to get a lot out of it, and it's a great read, but it's not going to hold your hand about these topics. And then also it's not for me because I'm not a Buddhist. So this is definitely similarly a book about Buddhism for Buddhists, so people who have a general grasp of the idea of Buddhism. And that's kind of why I liked the introduction, because that was more of an introduction for people who maybe have less knowledge. And then the other essays are not holding your hand about Buddhism. They're not telling you what Buddhism is. They're not explaining Buddhism to you. I'm also getting a lot out of it as a non-Buddhist about Buddhism, but it's not for me. It's not geared towards me learning about Buddhism. So I think that's important to note, because I could see how a lot of these subjects would like go over people's heads. But that being said, I'm getting so much out of it, and I think it's so interesting, especially, at the time of Black Lives Matter and at the time of George Floyd and all those things that were happening in the world, the onset of the pandemic and everything else. When this was published, it was very relevant, but it is also very relevant to today. And there's tons of things that I'm underlying and quoting, relevant both to society at large, relevant to my personal experience, relative to experience of people that I see in my life. I don't know if I've touched on this before because this vlog is a little bit all over the place, but I have learned about Buddhism since I was a child. My parents were very open about different religions. We were never religious, but they talked a lot about different religions and about just world religion in general and world culture in general. So I got such a great foundation of various religions, probably the least about Christianity and Catholicism, and more so about other religions. But I think even more so about Eastern religions. Now, that being said, I didn't get a lot of any of it. I only got a little foundation of things and the general idea that there are many religions, many spiritual paths in the world, and you don't need to know all of them or be a part of all of them to respect and care about all of them and for all of them to be important. But I think Buddhism definitely resonates with me, because a lot about Buddhism is like, just makes sense. Like, it just makes sense. It aligns with my own world thinking. It aligns with my own spiritual thinking. So it aligns with me and I align with it. Like, I can see a furthering of my own experience or my own ideas or ideals or beliefs within Buddhism. So I think that's really interesting. And again, I just really like learning about it and learning more. I am not a person who is destined for a religious or spiritual path necessarily, but I think I am a person who is destined to incorporate different things and to learn different things. Kind of on that subject, one of the things that I thought was interesting in this last essay was about Orientalism and the idea of fetishizing Orientalism, fetishizing Eastern culture in general, and how Buddhism is like a cool religion and how it's cooler to have Eastern religion, specifically Buddhism, than it would be to have other religion, especially when you're a young person growing up. Because this essay number 3, was all about a young woman and how she came to Buddhism and how she recognized Buddhism and how she recognized Blackness and her own Blackness as she was growing from a teenager to a young adult. So I thought that was really interesting. The idea that you could be participating in cultural appropriation and fetishization just by being Buddhist, and how there's a balance there and you have to recognize that, and how she's not saying that just because you're white or Black in America and practicing Buddhism, are you doing it for the wrong reasons, or are you not allowed to do it, or should you not do it, but that you have to recognize that there is just in that transfer some idea of Orientalism and fetishization and cultural appropriation. So I think that's really interesting, and it's something that I think I've struggled with, again, because I was taught by my parents to appreciate all different cultures, and because we went to all different types of cultural events. Like, we would go to the Greek festival, we would go to the Italian festival, we would go to the Native American festival, we would go to the Indian festival, we would go to all these different places, we would go to towns that were predominantly of one culture. So like Edison in New Jersey has a huge Indian population. We ate Indian food and all those things. And now none of that is bad. We did it all in the spirit of learning about different cultures and taking away universal truths that all cultures have and cultural exchange. And obviously those festivals are put on for a reason, and those restaurants are available for a reason, and all those things, so you are helping that community. But I think something that I struggle with later in life is how much of my appreciation of other cultures was cultural appropriation or fetishization. Like, for instance, I distinctly remember being a young person, probably pre-teens, and finding out about saris and going to an Indian store and buying a sari and the woman helping me like learn how to wear it and then wearing it to an event at a Christian church. Not because I was trying to upset the Christian church, but because my friend was having a ceremony there and that was like what I chose to wear because I thought it was a great, wonderful piece of clothing. And my appreciation of fashion and cultural fashion was always present as well. So like that story is just to say like, is that cultural appropriation? Like, yes, obviously it was, but also obviously I was a child and I was homaging. I was not trying to appropriate the culture, but I was homaging my appreciation for the culture, and I was showing my appreciation for the culture, and I was showing my appreciation for other clothes besides Western clothes, right? And the woman at the shop was totally happy. I remember her, you know, there was nothing weird about it. It wasn't gross. It wasn't done just for money. This one was genuinely happy to share her culture with me and to see me presenting her culture at that time. But looking back on it, like obviously, if I did that today, if I did that as a grown person, that might be weird, you know, that might be considered strange, especially because it's a culture that I don't really know that much about. I was learning about it at the time, but like, I don't really know. And I feel like the same if I were to like all of a sudden don a cross, even, you know, a Christian cross, like that would be a weird thing for me to do at this point. It's just an example, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, I thought that was a really interesting part of this essay. I think one of the things about the essays in this book, including the last one that I read, which I really liked, they're not super concise. Like they're not super well contained, which is fine. But if you're looking for something that has like, you know, an introduction, presents its thesis, and then has like a overarching theme at the end, like you're not really going to get it in these. They're a little bit more stream of consciousness than that and a little bit more all-encompassing. Now, of course, the intersectionality of Blackness and Buddhism, or Blackness and Americanism, or anything that has multiple intersections, which this has all of this, queerness, being American, being queer, being Black, being Buddhist, being an immigrant, being a woman, being, you know, all the things that these people are dealing with, like obviously, how do you encompass all of it? And how do you talk about any of it without talking about all of it? You can't. The intersectionality of all the different identities and all the different cultures and all the different thoughts, processes have to come together. So I can see why some of these are not like the most contained essays. But I'm really liking it and I'm glad that I got back kind of on the track of reading it. I've been trying to read like one essay a day for the last few days and try to get through them as opposed to stop in the middle if I can, just because these are a little bit more nebulous. It's helpful to just read them all at once. So when I read some more, I'll let you know. I should have started this video before I started eating. I have finished Black and Buddhist, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom. This was really interesting. Like I said earlier, it wasn't for me. It's really for Black people and Buddhists. But of course, I gleaned a lot out of it and I underlined a ton of it. I went through and annotated it, all except the first introduction part. So this is broken up into like many different parts. There's a dedication, there's the contents, there's in honor of George Floyd, which is like a little beginning part talking about when this book was published. I skipped that part because it had graphic depictions of violence that I did not want to read about. Seeing it all in real time at the time, I didn't necessarily feel like it added anything to my experience of this book. I know the circumstances and can hearken to those circumstances when they are talking about Black people in America and Black bodies. Then there's a foreword. That's what I read today. There was some good stuff. It is mostly like explaining what the book is going to be about, and since I already read the whole book, it wasn't really that necessary, so I did skim that a little. Then there's acknowledgments. I didn't read those. Then there's the introduction. So this is what I started with when I first started the book, and this is what I want to go back to and reread, because this had a ton of like information and aha moments and important quotes and things. But for the purpose of this video, I have completed this book. Then we get into the 8 essays of different Buddhists and their lives. Some of the essays are very much topical about the time and what's going on in the world at this time when this was written. Some of it is very much about their personal story. All of them are about their journey with Buddhism in one way or another. So I thought all these were really interesting, some of them better written than others, some of them more relevant, I think, to this particular book than others, but all of them, you know, with the common theme of being Black and Buddhist. I think if you are new to the idea of Buddhism and you want to learn more about Buddhism, this isn't the first place I would start, but maybe like, as I am, a little bit further into your journey reading about Buddhism, this is a good place to see real life people's experience with Buddhism. And then you have the added intersectional layer of being Black and Buddhist. If you are interested in Black culture and Black history in America, the intersection of that with spirituality and with religion, again, I don't think this is the first place I would start necessarily. I don't know where that would be, but I think this is maybe like an intermediate level reading on that. But very interesting, easy to comprehend, lots of things to be taken out of it. Like I said, I underlined the heck out of it. I'm very excited to keep this on my shelves to reference back to in the future. And now it is time to pick our February read. This was my January read for TBR Spin. It is March 12th, so we are behind in 2025's TBR Spin. I just pulled up Sarah's live streams, so I need to go to the second one. I'm not going to show you my list of books again because I told it to you in the beginning of this video, which I don't usually do, and I'm sure this video is going to be way too long, so let's cut to the chase. See if she marked this with chapters. Ooh, she didn't. Okay, so I just have to scroll through. So Sarah mentioned that we didn't have a swap prompt in the first spin of the year, but she put one in now. So it is possible that we'll have to swap out a book from our stack. And don't forget, you might always have to swap a book out from your stack if it doesn't fit the prompt. She is looking for something easy, and I'm looking for something easy as well. Okay, so the prompt was a rainy day read. So that could be something you were saving for a rainy day, which definitely could be something that you like need in the moment, right? It could be something that you want to read on a rainy day, like cuddle up, read. It could be like a ghost story or anything that you feel fits the mood of like a rainy day. Obviously, it could have something to do with water, etc., etc. So the prompts are very like vague and interpretable, you know? So let me look at my stack and see what I have. I have one thing in mind that I like want to read, but should I read that or should I look into something else? Hold steady. Okay, I picked a couple books off of my stack. The one that I'm like inclined to read is Cain by Jean Toomer. I've been wanting to read this one for a while, and it is very short. This edition is 239 pages, but I have another edition that's much smaller, and this audiobook I think is only like 4 or 5 hours long. So this is one that I could definitely read. It's a Black American modern classic. This one is like my first choice, and this would be like a rainy day read in that it's like short and I could get through it in a reasonable amount of time so that we can try to catch up with the prompts. I would call that like pulling it out of your back pocket rainy day read. The next thing that caught my eye is Yasunari Kawabata, The Dancing Girl of Isu and Other Stories. This has like kind of a rainy cover to me, like a gloomy, rainy cover in some ways. I really enjoy Yasunari Kawabata's work, and this is a collection of quite a few short stories. That could be fun, and I haven't read any short story collections this year. Not really. I did read Night of the Living Rez, but that doesn't really count. So this is a possibility. Next, I grabbed Love by Toni Morrison. So I specifically grabbed this one because it is short, but I have decided that I'm going to read Toni Morrison's books in order, in publication order. I read The Bluest Eye in February. I read Sula, reread Sula in March, and then I could read another Toni Morrison. But what I decided I'm going to do is keep Love here as a placeholder, but but it'll just count as whatever the next Toni Morrison I'm due to read when I hit it in the spin, if that makes sense. So if I decided I wanted to read a Toni Morrison for my rainy day read, I would read the Song of Solomon. I'm not going to do that one, I don't think, although I do think that works as a rainy day read. One, it's got a blue cover, which makes me think of rain. I don't know, cloudy skies, dark blue haze, whatever. But also, since I just read Sula, I'm not quite ready to read that again at the moment. My last potential option is Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lesson for Our Own. So this could be a rainy day read in like, we need some of this. We need to infuse our lives with some James Baldwin. I did already start this one a few years ago. I think I would just go ahead and read it from the beginning again, but Begin Again. Funny, but I don't think I'm going to read this one because I think it's a little heavy for me right now, and I think it's going to make me sad, which could be an interpretation of rainy day read. I'm going to decide one of these two. I'm going to decide either between Kane or the short story collection, and I'm not going to pick in this video. Like I said, this video is super long. Chippy, what are you doing? You just want to get in the window? Okay, hold on. I'll probably need to read a couple pages of each of these to decide, so come back in the next TBR Spin vlog that you see, my February 2025 vlog, which we'll be filming in March and April. You'll find out what I picked. Let me know if you're participating in the TBR Spin for 2025. Let me know what you got for February or March or whatever book you happen to be on. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!